The Vikings were a little rough around the edges, but these traditions might have been a bit too much. These are the top 10 surprising, scandalous Viking traditions, and if you know about a tradition that belongs in this video, please tell us about it in the comments below. Number 10. Weddings. When we look back on history, the traditions of marriages generally stand out as unique ways to peer into the lives of ancient civilizations. With the Vikings, marriages were generally done as ways to join houses through blood ties, which were rarely romantic. Traditionally held on Friday, the day of Freya, goddess of fertility, the couple was separated to go through separate rituals. The bride would take a bath and also remove the kronsen, which symbolized her status as a woman who was unwed, and store it for her future daughter. The groom would then go and break into his ancestor's tomb and steal their stuff, usually their swords. During the ceremony, rings and family swords would be exchanged, and a feast would be had in their honor. During this, one tradition was to stab their swords into a pillar. The deeper the sword went, the better their marriage would be and the more children they'd have. Number 9. Teeth painting. When exhuming the many skeletons of Vikings that have passed throughout history, a remarkable detail was found throughout all of them. Notches of varying size, depth, and length were found to have been cut into the teeth of these ancient warriors. The reason for their existence was something of a mystery. Furthermore, comparing the style to historical Vikings, the name of the Danish king Harald Bluetooth suggests that his title may have been slightly more literal than initially thought. This would have been achieved through the application of a mixture of resins and dyes, though whether or not it was permanent would be hard to know for sure, since the evidence has long since rotted away. Number 8. Blonde hair. The image of the Viking as a blonde-haired, blue-eyed warrior is prolific and also wrong. While the majority of Vikings were observed to be blonde and described as such, this was actually due to an extremely early application of hair dye. That being said, this wasn't solely due to fashion, though blonde hair was considerably valued in Viking society. The method in which Vikings dyed their hair was through the use of lye, which contains potassium. Potassium can often strip the pigmentation off of hair, and if Vikings washed frequently, which they actually did, they were weirdly hygienic, then it would lead to their hair gradually being dyed blonde. A side effect of this was that lye was also extremely toxic to lice, which helped prevent outbreaks on ships. Number 7. Torches. Moving straight from hygiene to whatever this is. Starting a fire is extremely hard. You'll see two guys rubbing sticks together in the movies and suddenly fire appears, but you know what? That doesn't work at all. The conditions for friction alone being enough to start a fire have to be absolutely perfect. The right temperature, the right humidity, the dryness, all of it. So this is why people decided to find other methods for starting fires, such as flint, a material that is fairly easy to find wherever you go. But with flint, you also need tinder, and this is where it gets a little weird. It always gets weird with tinder. The Vikings had a particular species of mushroom that they'd use for their torches, which they would carefully prepare and then boil in their own urine. Well, because, and it's honestly more likely that they found this out through trial and error, they probably didn't actually know the chemicals and all this, urine contains sodium nitrate, which burns real good, as it's a chemical neighbor of potassium nitrate, which is found in gunpowder. This was actually a fairly common technique for creating torches at the time, and, you know, just really cool. If not, like, you know, really weird. Number 6. The 81 Yule Offerings. Christmas is coming, and if you're a Viking, that usually isn't a great thing. Not because of the Norse gods or anything, Vikings were actually pretty quick to pick up Christianity, but more because Christmas was the time where a pretty brutal ritual would take place. Specifically referred to as Yule, the ritual was estimated to have been in honor of family members that had passed away, and generally involved singing, dancing, and killing 81 men to offer their heads to the gods. Merry Christmas! Number 5. How to ward off Draugr. Draugr, for those who didn't play Skyrim, are a Viking denomination of the undead. It's presumed as a certainty that when a person is buried in the ground, they will rise from the dead as a Draugr. From there, they'll attack people, and everyone will generally have a bad time until the Draugr is killed via decapitation, dismemberment, or any act of making it just not move anymore. To prevent this from happening in the first place, Viking land burials were done extremely carefully. Straw would be placed under the body and scissors would be laid on the chest, while their toes were sewn together and nails were pushed through their feet. They would then deconstruct a portion of the house and take the corpse out through it, reconstructing it later, as Draugr were believed to follow the path back from their place of burial. They would then be entombed, and all of the items they'd owned that remained in their house would be turned upside down until their grave was magically sealed. Number 4. Berserkers. A denomination of shamans, Berserkers were warriors trained to fight and channel various spirits into their body. There were 3 schools of Berserker: the wolf, boar, and bear, each one serving a slightly different role. To train, these Berserkers were sent out into the wilderness to become more in tune with nature, and also drive themselves insane in the process. This would supposedly imbue them with the strengths of their respective school of combat, and so when they were called upon to enter into Norse conflicts, they were supposedly given the ability to transform into their respective animal, ripping the opposing warriors to shreds. This account is shared both by Vikings and the victims of Vikings, though it is more than likely that this is just an exaggeration meant to imply the bestial behavior of a berserker when in a trance. Number 3. The Blood Eagle. This one is not for the faint of heart. A ritualistic form of execution, the Blood Eagle is an extremely violent method of dispatching enemies, which is described in the sagas. For a long period of time, these were thought to have been fictional, but as recent bodies have been unearthed that appear to have been victims of the Blood Eagle, there seems to be more truth to this than initially thought. The Blood Eagle involves the victim being laid on their front and a knife being used to separate their ribs from their spine. The spine is then removed and their lungs are spread out in the form of crimson wings, creating the eponymous Blood Eagle. Number 2. The Blot. The Blot was set as a ritual that would occur once every season at 4 set intervals in a year, but another could be organized if circumstances required it. The most well-recorded Blot was one performed by Sigurd Håkonsson, detailed by Snorri Sturluson in the saga of Hakon the Good. This ritual involved a massive amount of human and animal sacrifices, as well as sacrifices of weaponry. Blood was also collected and splattered on the walls, altars, and participants. A feast would then be had and toasts would be made, first to the gods and then to the fallen. Number 1. Viking Chief Cremation Ceremonies. We've all heard of Viking cremations, how they load their dead bro onto the ship and sail it out into the ocean, sending a flaming arrow into it so that they might be buried at sea. However, if it was a chief that died, things would get a little bit more screwed up and nasty. First off, one of the chief's girls would then volunteer or be volunteered to join the chief in the afterlife. She would then be made to get mad drunk and then would be made to sleep with every single man in the village. Seriously. She would then be strangled, stabbed, and loaded onto the boat and the whole fire thing would go down. What can I say except what? Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe and have a good one.